Hey guys, what's going on? It is Ash here, coming at you today with another pro player tip episode. Really excited to bring this one to you guys. I asked you guys a few weeks ago now on Twitter, who is the very best Siege player in the entire game that you guys know of? And a lot of you, the majority of you guys, answered Patriots34. So I've been lucky enough to get him on the channel. We're going to have a conversation with him about his very favorite Expo decks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring him on. Enjoy, guys. Alright guys, here I am joined by Patriots34. He is a pro Siege player, and I've never had on a pro tip Siege player episode before. Really excited to do this one. Patriots34, what's going on, man?
Hey Ash, what's up?
Not a lot, dude. I'm really excited to have you on. We're going to be talking about your Expo deck today. Before we get to that, why don't you give us a brief intro about you, what clan you're in, how long you've been playing, and what led you to picking up a Siege deck to begin with?
Okay, I am currently in Reddit Alpha. You know, shout out to Woody, the leader.
Woody! What's up? Love that guy.
I did start playing Expo when the 15K tournaments were still around. In a Brenchong tournament, me and Bag Clash Royale out of Fort, and also he's a clanmate. We were just in a line call one day, you know, messing around with a couple of decks, and you know, we both played Expo, and I really got into it, and I just kept playing it and playing it and playing it. And then one day in the Super Magical Cup, I decided to, you know, play an Expo deck, and I ended up winning the whole thing.
Boom. So then you were like, wow, this really works, or I'm really good at it. Either way, I don't care. I'm going to keep playing it, right?
Yeah, and that was actually the version with lightning in it.
Okay, yes, because there has been a few versions of this deck, and we'll cover them in just a bit. So now, have you always played Siege since then, or do you switch things up?
I've played more like Siege-style decks. Before the balance changes, I did play lots of Minor Poison also, but yeah. I can't see that as a viable strategy anymore. I
know, man. I'm so bummed out about. I mean, I'm happy about the Poison nerf because of the Goizen decks, but I'm at the same time kind of upset because it does affect minor control decks as well. You know. So,
yeah, I did love minor control.
So yeah, I'm trying to adjust, and I might dabble in your Siege. So let's kind of get to your tips and stuff, because there's a lot to cover here. We're looking at you're basically, this is the version that you're using of the deck right now, right? With the with the Fireball now?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about, before we get too deep into all the nitty-gritty, let's take a step back here, because I tend to get ahead of myself, and tell us a little bit about the general philosophy of this deck. You know, is it an aggressive deck? Is it a defensive deck? What is your mentality going into a match with this specific deck?
You know, I see this deck as more of a, you know, like an offensive deck, because, and very aggressive, of course. I like to play it aggressive. So usually I'll play like an Ice Spirit in the back, or like some guards or Mega Minion. And then once I'm at like 9, 10 Elixir, I place down an Expo. And I it really depends what your opponent plays. They have like Minion Horde, Barbarians, you know, those can be Fire Spirit targets, or if they have let's see here, like a Mega, and also a Mega Minion, I'd place down my Mega Minion. That's why I switched Mega Minion in for Mini P.E.K.K.A. now. So, and then, of course, you have the Inferno Tower if you see like a P.E.K.K.A., Giant, Golem, and the log is just to push back like a quick Ice Wizard, Musketeer, Guards, Ice Spirit, etc.
So basically, I mean, the whole deck is supporting the Expo, right? Am I wrong there, or is it basically the Expo is your win condition, right?
Yes. It's like a giant deck. Everything revolves around a giant or a P.E.K.K.A.
Exactly. So basically what you're trying to do, you know what, folks should know that I'm going to go ahead and link, you have a Reddit review, really good in-depth review of this deck as well, so if they want further reading about this, on top of the replays and this conversation, they can definitely check that out. But in that review, I noticed that you said, the #1 rule to the Expo is you try to only play it if you're at 10, aka full Elixir. Do you still stand by that? I know it was a couple weeks old, or has your philosophy changed at all?
Yes, I do. I mean, I see people play it when they're at 6 Elixir, and I'm like, no. Please wait until at least 9, 10.
Okay.
You know,
And we are going to get into that because I have some specific questions about not only when to place the Expo, but how much supporting units you're going to use behind it. But before we get to that, I do want to talk a little bit about just all the cards in the deck offensively and how they kind of have that synergy with the Expo. Now, Mortar players often use the Inferno Tower to protect their Mortar. And I noticed that through these replays, you do that sometimes, but very rarely. Do you want to talk about, what your perfect win condition is in terms of if you could get the perfect combination against an opponent using a generic deck? Because I know it does fluctuate depending, obviously, on what you're going to counter with. But let's just say it's the first time you play the Expo in a match. What is your perfect combination of cards?
Well, if I had 4 cards in my hand for this meta, I would say, of course, you need the Expo, you definitely need the Ice Spirit, Guards, and Mega Minion. Those are the 4, I would say, the most essential cards. But if they do have such things as 3 Musketeers, Barbarians, Minion Horde, you definitely want to have Fire Spirits or Fireball in your starting hand.
And speaking of Fireball, now's probably a good question because throughout these replays, I noticed that you're not afraid to Fireball in getting a negative elixir trade if it means protecting your towers. I noticed that you do Fireball the Princess sometimes. Is that something that you've always done?
Yes, I have. I really love Fireball. It's always been in one of my decks, ladder tournament. But I feel if the Princess, if they place it down on the tower that I'm going for, I will Fireball it because it gets rid of the Princess, and it gives me extra damage because Expo is all about the chip.
Absolutely. Yeah, because when you think about it, besides, some coincidental maybe guards turn into a counter from defense to offense, you really are relying so heavily on that Expo, so it is actually a really good tip that you're going to go ahead and use that Fireball as much as you can on the tower that you're trying to chip away on.
Yeah, of course. And I do love to do, little mini pushes with... place an Ice Spirit down, then wait a second, and then place down the Fire Spirits, or place the Guards down, and then put an Ice Spirit in front. Just, a couple 400, 500 damage.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And let me ask you this, right? Because I noticed I have so many questions. I'm trying to get to them all, right? So let's get back to the opening hand. Let's pretend you have that perfect, ideal opening hand to start out a match. Now, I know on three Musketeer decks, for example, I know that rarely do pro players advocate splitting their Musketeers right off the bat to start a match. I mean, you're playing your entire hand, and there's a lot that could feasibly go wrong. Now, what about you in terms of the Expo? Assuming that you start out with that perfect hand of Expo, Ice Spirit, Fire Spirits, Guards, are you going to play the Expo right off the bat? What is your play going to be?
Without a doubt, I'm going to play the Expo no matter what. I would even play the Expo with a semi-decent starting hand. Doesn't matter. I love showing my opponent that I have the Expo and being ha ha ha, you're not going to defend it.
I like this. This guy's cocky. I like him. I like that mentality, man. I wasn't expecting that answer, but I'm a big fan of it. Okay, so you're going to show your cards. You don't care. You're not scared of them. So you're putting down your Expo, and then are you just going to wait and see what they do? Is that your first move? I mean, obviously you're not going to throw down Fire Spirits for no reason, or do you?
Yeah, I usually wait till they play something down, but I'm usually hovering Guards or Mini P.E.K.K.A. just in case, quick reaction time. Okay,
great. So if they play, obviously Guards or Mini P.E.K.K.A., that's pretty obvious. I mean, if they're playing, what if they play I'm not Mini P.E.K.K.A. anymore, but Fire Spirits. But what if they play a Mega Minion, say, or a Hog Rider? Are you going to, what's your play going to be, your counter? Guards?
Yeah, probably Guards with an Ice Spirit or Mega Minion with an Ice Spirit, depending on the situation.
Okay, and okay, so that pretty much covers your ideal basic hand. Let me ask you this: is there any starting hand that you could have, assuming your opponent doesn't play anything? So let's say you're both sitting there in a stalemate at 10 elixir. Is there any starting hand you could have that you wouldn't play the Expo? Assuming again that your opponent hasn't done anything yet.
Yeah, I probably would place it down no matter what, actually.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's talk about how you're placing your cards. Now, I noticed that you're a big fan of putting down the Ice Spirit and the Fire Spirit way back in back of your tower and then putting down the Expo? Is that how you like to do it, or does it just really depend?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just depends on the hand. If I have Fire Spirits or Ice Spirit in hand, I will play them in the back. But if they do have, like, a Giant or an Ice Spirit of their own or an Inferno Tower, I will tend to save the Ice Spirit for when my Expo is fighting the other troops.
Okay, that makes sense. And obviously, if you start out with a hand of, say, let's say it's the same starting hand, except for you don't have Expo for whatever reason. Let's say you have Inferno Tower. Are you going to probably, and let's pretend that Expo is your 5th card. Are you just going to place your Fire Spirit or something and then cycle to the Expo and immediately place it?
Yeah, I definitely will. And this is actually a big thing. If they place something on, like, the right or left side, I'll play the Expo on the opposite side.
Okay, that's really important. Okay, so you're always going in the opposite side of their big push to start out with?
Yeah, definitely, because if I don't know how popular Giant stacks will be anymore, but what they try to do is counter push against you. So if they have like 700 damage on my one tower, I will generally tend to try to take their other tower because they can counter push me, and that's exactly what I don't want.
Yeah, that does seem to be a little bit of a tough spot for any chip deck, but especially for an Expo deck, because if you have a Giant coming at you in the tower all the time, in the tower that you're trying to do damage on, that can create a little bit of an issue. So I'm assuming those might be one of those. Let's pretend that you have, say, 700 HP off one of the towers and the other tower hasn't been touched. And then your opponent, for whatever reason, starts focusing in on that lane that you already have damage done, and they have a tanky deck using a Golem or a Giant or a Lava Hound. Is that when you're going to start comboing the Inferno Tower with the Expo?
Yeah, definitely. I will, if they have one of those if they try to set up a big push in the back, if they place like a Giant and a Bowler or a P.E.K.K.A. or Golem by itself, I would definitely push the other side because they'll definitely be in trouble.
Okay, so what if... Talk a little bit about the synergy between the Inferno Tower and the Expo. I know I mentioned it earlier, but can you kind of elaborate on, when are you placing the Inferno Tower up towards the bridge with the Expo?
Yeah, I will generally only tend to place it against Giants, P.E.K.K.A.s, Bowlers, Golems, Lava Hounds, but, like, kind of mini tanks like Knight, Ice Wizard, Dark Prince, Baby Dragon, things like that. I will not place it because it's simply just not a good elixir trade. If they have like a Baby Dragon or a Knight, they're generally going to place something cheaper. I don't know, maybe like Spear Goblins or Mini P.E.K.K.A. And Inferno isn't great against that, so I tend to stay away from things like that.
Okay, so you're reserving the Inferno Tower really to the big, not so much just big HP, but really big elixir cost cards.
Yes.
Okay, like slow-moving tanks, basically. Okay, so and you're relying on the rest of your cards to play defense against everything else, pretty much.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, what about one last question on offense? When would you consider, if ever, changing the lane that you're focusing on? So let's say that your opponent just keeps coming at you with really big pushes, really heavy pushes in the lane that you've already done a decent amount of damage, chip damage on. Is there ever a scenario where you would switch lanes and just start on the fresh tower, or do you always want to focus on that one tower?
It is okay to focus on a new tower if you feel like your opponent is going to push too heavily on that one side, and once they make that 9-10 elixir commitment on that one side, and you push your Expo on the other side, you generally have a good chance of getting that tower down to what you had the other side down to.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And if this will kind of transition us into the defensive question because it really applies to both offense and defense, but why don't you talk a little bit about the scenario where your opponent strikes first. They take down one of your towers and you have both of their towers still standing. That can create a little bit of an issue, obviously, especially if you were already being offensive in the lane that you lost the tower, because they can place defensive units right on your Expo. So how are you going to handle that situation?
Yeah, that's definitely a hard situation to be put in, because if you place an Expo down on the side that's already been taken, your Expo's vulnerable to be, like, a Giant can be placed down on top of it. it's really hard to push the other lane, because if you push the other lane with your Expo, they're going to push that same lane too. So
yeah,
it's kind of almost impossible to win unless you get like a mini P.E.K.K.A on tower or something.
So yeah, that is really... So you said mini P.E.K.K.A a couple of times, but it's not in this one we're looking at. Would you recommend adding a mini P.E.K.K.A in any scenario? Are you still kind of playing around with that, or how are you feeling about the mini P.E.K.K.A versus the Mega Minion?
I'm still playing around with it. I think the Mega Minion will become more viable now with other Mega Minions and less minor poison, because, you know, that mini P.E.K.K.A was a ground unit and could take out a minor, but I'd say Mega Minion is a better option, but I do like the mini P.E.K.K.A still.
Okay, so definitely, see, here's the thing that I struggle with, right? If I'm going to start playing a Siege deck, which I really want to, especially since my minor control has kind of taken a big hit in the nerfs, I think that I'm probably going to suck at first. So I think I'm always going to be in that position. Not always, but I think a lot of the times I'll be in that position where I lose a tower and automatically I'm bummed out because I know it's going to be really difficult to pull the comeback. So what that's going to do is cause me to start playing more defensively. And to start out this episode, one of the biggest things you said is that you like to play aggressively. So I already feel like I'm kind of behind the 8 ball, so to speak. So is there any advice you have for me? Is it okay to play more defensively? And just because I'm worried about losing a tower and being kind of screwed?
Yeah, it's definitely okay to be defensively, but you gotta be really careful and hope that your opponent gets it like a -5 or 4 elixir down on you, because you won't really have any more opportunities since you're playing defensive.
Yeah. It is tough going from the mentality, like as a new player who's unfamiliar with Siege, are there just maybe, let's kind of transition a little bit into the, well, let's talk about defense real quick. Defensively, what are you doing in this? I mean, obviously you have the Inferno Tower for all the obvious reasons, and you have a lot of great defensive cards. You have both of the spirits and you have guards. Anything else, any notes defensively, anything that, you know, do's or do nots?
Yeah, definitely. You need the splash damage from both of the spirits, the log, and the fireball. Those are your main splash units, and guards are quick defense against a mini P.E.K.K.A, Hog Rider, Knight, any small troops like archers or something. And then you have the Mega Minion to fight off. You know, you can fight off a Musketeer, Valkyrie, Hog, incoming bowlers, princes, witches, any of that.
Yeah, so you really have a lot of defensive options. You know, this ties into defense, and it also covers common mistakes, because I tried, well, I've been having a long backstory, but I've been having internet issues all day, so I couldn't record a match myself and share it with you to critique it, but I lost a match 1-0 playing this deck for the first time, and I think the reason I lost, and this might be a common mistake, so I wanted to specifically ask you about it, is I think I overcommitted to defending my Expo. So my question to you is, and I lost my tower because of that overcommitment, and they put a golem right on the bridge afterwards, and I didn't have enough time to get I had enough time to get my Inferno Tower down, but by that point they had already backed it up with a Mega Minion. I lost my tower, and I lost the match. So is that a common mistake, or when do you just give up on defending an Expo, if at all?
Yeah, definitely. When you do not have the right combos together, I mean, you literally can just throw your hands up and be like, you got me there, I can't do anything. That's like when they have a Mega Minion, they play it on your Expo. In this deck, you have to have Mega Minion to kill another Mega Minion. And so you pretty much just let it die and don't... Because I've played like Ice Spirit and Fire Spirits, but that's a waste of 3 elixir because they do not kill a Mega Minion.
That's exactly what I did. I played on the Mega Minion, I played a I want to say, now it's a little cloudy in my head, but I want to say I did something like that. I wasted 3 elixir for no reason at all. Then I was caught really with 4 elixir with a golem coming in my lane along with a Mega Minion with like a few HP left. But then I had that weird position where I only had the Inferno Tower, where I wanted to play the Inferno Tower, and I did. But like I said, at that point, it was all for naught, you know, because everybody knows that the golem lasts forever, even with the Inferno Tower, because of the 2 golemites afterwards. So, I don't know. So are you comfortable in the right scenario, just wasting all your elixir defending the Expo?
Yes, in certain scenarios I am, because if they only have like a a rocket or like a hog to punish me, I wouldn't be that scared. I'd be more scared about those bigger ones like Three Musketeers, P.E.K.K.A, Giant, you know, things that really can take your tower down in one go. But, you know, Fire Spirits are a cheap option to Hog Rider. I think the Hog Rider maybe gets like 3 to 4 hits with Fire Spirits or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I think that... So what is the deck that you struggle the most with against an Expo deck? As an Expo Siege player, what deck do you see that you're like, oh crap, this could be difficult?
Yeah, definitely some new Three Musketeers decks coming out with Ice Golem. Ice Golem is a great counter if you play it in the other lane. I mean, the Expo just shoot at it all day long, and it's just it makes me mad.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. So how do you combat a Three Musketeer Ice Golem deck? I know it's difficult, but you must have some sort of strategy that you or mentality that you take going into those matches.
I try to catch them with as little elixir. When they play the Three Musketeers, I'll generally fireball the 2 with the tower, and then if they pair like an Ice Spirit with the, you know, 2 low health Musketeers, I will log it, get extra value with it. And for the lone Musketeer, probably like Guards or the Mega Minion is probably my best option right there.
Yeah, so just basically just be very careful and cognizant of when the Three Musketeers are coming and try to have your fireball ready and, you know, focus defensively if only for those 20 seconds that you have to counter the Three Musketeers. Is that pretty much right? All right. Any other common mistakes before we kind of wrap this up?
Definitely playing, like if they know what you're going to play, if you play like the Expo down and then you play Guards and they predict you with like Fire Spirits and they hit the Expo and your Guards, and it's basically try not to give your opponent value for what they're playing. Try to get your value out of what you're playing so you can counter push them.
Okay, so that makes sense. So basically, so what are you doing? So you're always reacting as an Expo player. I mean, you put your Expo down, and then you let the opponent always make the move, and then you're just going to counter based off what they do. Never let them counter. You know, never let them study you enough to know what's coming. Right?
Yes.
All right, well, cool, man. I think that this is a lot of valuable information. I could ask you questions for days. I'm sure the viewers and the listeners are like, man, this guy is just giving them 20 questions. But, you know, being a player who's unfamiliar with Siege, I feel like that there's a lot to learn, you know. So I'm excited to try out this deck, and I'll let you know how I do. I loved having you on, man. I'd love to have you on again sometime, maybe sharing a new iteration of this deck. I'm not sure if you're a Mortar player as well, but maybe we could talk about Mortar decks as well in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a great video.
Thanks, man. It was awesome to have you on. Any shout-outs or anything before I let you go?
Yeah. Shout out to Reddit Alpha. And, you know, my boy, Saul from Reddit Alpha, too. He deserves a shout-out.
All right, Saul, you heard it, man. Patriots34, thanks so much for coming on, man. Again, really appreciate it, and I'm sure people are really going to enjoy this this video. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, Ash. Thanks, Ash, for letting me on your channel.
No problem. Take care, man.
Take care.